Most women have been conditioned to wait. Wait for him to call first. Wait for him to text first. Wait for him to show interest. Wait for him to decide if something is going to happen. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that expressing interest makes you look desperate, weak, or too available. But what if I told you that there are psychological switches inside a man that you can activate without chasing, without begging, and without losing 1 ounce of feminine power? What if I told you that there are specific words, delivered with calm confidence, that flip his instinct from hesitation to pursuit, not because you force him to, but because you awaken something deep inside his psychology that makes him feel inspired to act? Because the truth is, men don't actually fear making the first move. They fear misreading the moment. They fear humiliation. They fear stepping forward without knowing they are safe. A man's biggest hidden insecurity is not rejection itself, but rejection when he has emotionally invested. And whether you know it or not, most men are walking around carrying silent emotional bruises from times they tried and lost. The confident men, the shy men, the mysterious men, the alpha men, every one of them knows what failure felt like. They just learned to hide it well. So they wait. They wait for a signal. They wait for a sign. They wait for something that tells them, if I move toward her, I won't be punished for it. And that is where your power lives. Not in chasing, but in unlocking. Not in proving, but in revealing. Not in trying to convince someone to choose you, but in awakening their natural masculine drive to pursue. Here's the truth you were never taught. Men fall in love through action. Women fall in love through words and emotional bonding. A man moves closer when he feels safe to take action, when he feels respected, not judged, when he feels inspired, not pressured, when he senses that if he steps into the masculine position, you won't take it away from him. You don't need to perform. You just need to communicate the right emotional message. And you do that through a psychological language men respond to instinctively: subtle permission, curiosity, and emotional openness. When those 3 elements combine, something extraordinary happens. His guard drops, his fear dissolves, and his pursuit activates. You become the woman he chooses boldly, not the woman he watches quietly from a distance. Before we talk about the exact words you can say to a man to flip that switch, let's expose something deeper about male psychology. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in human behavior, explained that every person has an archetype, a psychological blueprint that shapes how they behave in relationships. For most men, that archetype is the protector, the initiator, the leader, the one who moves first. But Jung also said that men carry an unconscious fear, the fear of exposing the shadow self, the vulnerable part of them that could be hurt. That's why a confident man may flirt with playful eyes and teasing words, yet freeze when it's time to say, "I like you." That's why he can talk to everyone, but suddenly loses language when it's you. That's why he can be bold in other areas of life, yet terrified in love. The closer something matters to his heart, the more he hesitates. And this is where individuation, another concept from Jung, comes in. Individuation is the process of becoming one's full self, not the performative version created for the world. When a man meets a woman who feels safe, who communicates interest without pressure, he begins that journey. He steps toward who he truly is instead of the mask he's been wearing. So listen closely. Men don't fall for women who try to convince them. Men fall for women who inspire them to step into the version of themselves they want to be. When you understand this, you stop begging for attention and start activating desire. You stop waiting for him to decide, and instead you become the woman he chooses without hesitation. Because desire is not born from desperation. It's born from invitation. Let me give you a real example. A woman once told me she had been talking to a guy for months. The chemistry was undeniable. The energy was there. The looks, the laughter, the lingering silence, all of it. Everyone around them could see what was happening except the 2 people involved. But he never made a move, and she was convinced he didn't care. So I asked her one question. Has he been given permission? She said no. She realized she had been cold to protect herself, distant to avoid appearing too eager, guarded so she wouldn't be hurt. And what she thought was playing it cool was actually building a wall he could not climb. So I told her to say one simple sentence with a soft smile and eye contact the next time. She saw him. You know, I really admire a man who isn't afraid to make the first move. One sentence, not a confession, not a chase, not an emotional risk. And do you know what happened? He kissed her 3 minutes later. He told her afterward that he had been wanting to make that move for months but didn't want to be disrespectful or scare her. He wasn't uncertain about his feelings. He was uncertain about hers. That's how quickly the right words opened the door. Not because he didn't care, but because he needed to know he wouldn't be walking into a punch. Men are not complicated. They are emotional creatures who express in different ways. They want to feel chosen too. They want to feel wanted too. They want to feel like stepping forward is worth the risk. So imagine the power in your voice when you say something genuine, calm and light that signals, I'm not going to punish you for wanting me. That is power, not control, not manipulation. Power through emotional intelligence. There are words that bypass defense and speak directly to the masculine instinct to pursue. Words that ignite the desire to act. Words that pull him closer without you sacrificing pride or dignity. Words that transform hesitation into certainty. And once you learn them, something awakens inside him. An instinct he may have buried long ago. A fire he thought was safer to keep hidden. A confidence that only rises when the right woman gives him the space to rise. Here's what most people never understand about attraction. It isn't built through pressure, intensity, or dramatic declarations. Attraction is built through tension, the emotional electricity that forms between two people when there is curiosity, uncertainty, and possibility. That tension is what makes a man lean forward instead of stepping back. And the fastest way to create that tension is not by demanding clarity or asking direct, romantic questions. It's through subtle, psychological signals that make him feel both safe and challenged at the same time. Men are wired for the thrill of pursuit, but they need certainty they're not walking into emotional danger. So when you communicate admiration, respect, and softness, you awaken the natural masculine urge to move toward you. But most women accidentally do the opposite. They hide interest too deeply and then wonder why he never acts. They believe the best strategy is pretending not to care, staying distant, or being mysterious. But what actually happens is he feels rejected before he ever tries. Most men would rather never attempt something than try and feel foolish. So they retreat, stay silent, and convince themselves that you're out of reach. That's why today you're going to learn the emotional code that flips a man's internal switch. Not through performance, not through manipulation, but through authentic psychological communication. Because once you know how to speak to a man's deeper emotional structure, he becomes naturally pulled toward you. Not forced, pulled. Think about how many relationships never started because both people were waiting. Waiting for a sign, waiting for a moment, waiting for permission. How many incredible connections died before? They were born because nobody dared to make a move, and all it would have taken was one sentence, one spark, one moment of emotional courage. Men crave emotional safety more than they'll ever admit. They're taught that masculinity means never needing reassurance, never hesitating, never being afraid. But the truth? The majority of men today are exhausted from pretending to be invincible. They act strong, but inside they are haunted by the fear of embarrassment, rejection, and misjudgment. They may walk with confidence, but their heart hides behind armor built over years. So when a woman gives him even the smallest opening, everything changes instantly. He feels seen, understood, respected, and those emotions awaken masculine fire. Here's the psychological truth supported by relationship researchers and emotional behavior experts. Men don't pursue because they're fearless. They pursue because they feel safe enough to risk fear. That means if you want him to make the first move, your words need to communicate 3 things. 1. Admiration, which touches his ego and masculinity. 2. Safety, which speaks to his emotional core. 3. Challenge, which activates his instinct to pursue. Combine those 3, and you unlock a reaction in him that he can't suppress. It becomes biological, not logical. So here are 3 psychological shifts you need to understand before you speak the words that will trigger him to act. Shift 1. Show interest without taking the lead. There's a subtle difference between chasing and inviting. Chasing feels desperate, and men pull away from that instantly. Inviting feels magnetic, and men move toward that instinctively. An invitation is not you doing the work, it's you opening the door. When you give a man a signal that says it's safe to step closer, you engage his courage instead of his fear. That's why the most powerful lines are soft, confident and relaxed, never emotional or dramatic. For example, a simple statement like, "I always admire a man who knows what he wants," creates excitement in him because it communicates respect. And respect is the gasoline of masculinity. The moment a man feels respected, he rises. Shift 2. Become emotionally approachable. Many women think staying guarded makes them strong. But emotional walls don't protect you. They just block connection. A man can feel energetic openness even if you don't say anything explicitly. Your tone, your pause, your eye contact, all of these send signals. When you soften and stay present, he feels invited instead of evaluated. That's when he becomes brave. If your energy says you may approach, everything changes. He moves, he acts, he chooses. Shift 3. Trigger his desire to prove himself. Men aren't motivated by comfort. They're motivated by meaning. When he senses that he could win you, his competitive instinct ignites. And he wants to step into the role of the man who goes after what matters. Not because you asked him to, but because he wants to. This is where the psychology becomes powerful. When a man decides internally, "I want her," no force can stop him. And the right words can trigger that internal decision in seconds. They bypass his fear and awaken instinct. Which brings us to what you came for. The exact words that flip his switch from hesitation to pursuit. The words that awaken the masculine instinct to move first. The words that make him take action immediately, with confidence and certainty. Words that don't pressure him, but invite him. Not dramatic, not emotional, just powerful. There comes a moment in every connection when the energy shifts. You can feel it in the silence between words, in the way he looks at you a little too long, in the way the air becomes heavier, more charged, more alive. That moment is the doorway. If nothing is said, it closes. If the right words are spoken, everything changes instantly. Men don't decide to make a move logically. They decide emotionally, in a microsecond when their instinct overrides fear. Your voice, your tone, your confidence. These are the triggers that activate that instinct. Not beauty, not perfection, not romantic speeches, just a few simple words spoken with calm certainty. Because here's a truth most people never realize: attraction isn't about impressing someone. Attraction is about unlocking something inside them that was already there, waiting. When you speak to the emotional part of a man rather than the logical part, you bypass resistance completely. You're not trying to convince him, you're awakening him. His heart hears something before his brain has time to analyze, and that's when action happens. So, I'm going to give you the exact words that activate that shift. But before I do, you need to understand why they work so powerfully and why almost no woman uses them. Men are constantly scanning for emotional risk. Every decision they make in love, dating, or intimacy runs through the question, will I be rejected or humiliated if I try? Even the strongest men, the confident ones, the charismatic ones, the ones who look like nothing scares them, carry that question deep in their unconscious mind. And unless they feel safe, they won't act. So, the first part of the psychological strategy is this. Remove the fear without removing the challenge. If a woman gives everything, he feels overwhelmed. If she gives nothing, he feels defeated. But if she gives the hint of safety, he becomes unstoppable. That hint comes through admiration and subtle affirmation. Admiration is the oxygen of masculinity. When a man feels admired, his courage rises like a flame meeting gasoline. So the first powerful line is this: I really respect a man who knows what he wants. Simple, confident, soft but strong. That sentence hits a man in his identity. It doesn't ask him to act. it invites him to act. The second line deepens the psychological spark because it shifts the energy from general to personal. It creates intimacy without pressure. Being around you feels easy. I like that. Those words disarm him instantly. They tell his nervous system, relax, you're safe. Men rarely hear emotional affirmation. The world expects them to always be strong, confident, and self-assured, even when they're breaking inside. So when a woman offers warmth and softness, he feels pulled toward her with magnetic force. Now comes the line that changes everything. The line that flips the internal switch. The line that transforms hesitation into action. Say it slowly, gently, with a small smile and steady eye contact. If you wanted to make a move right now, I wouldn't stop you. Watch what happens to him. His breath will change. His eyes will drop to your lips or your hands. His body will shift closer without thinking. Because those words collapse the fear barrier. They remove uncertainty. They give him permission without pressure. They turn possibility into urgency. You're not chasing him. You're not confessing feelings. You're not begging for anything. You're inviting him to step into his masculine role. You're awakening instinct instead of demanding action. You're speaking directly to the deepest emotional core inside him. The need to feel chosen, respected, and desired. And once the switch flips, nothing can stop him. He won't hesitate. He won't overthink. He will move. He will lead. Now, there is another version of this line that works especially well if the moment is playful, light, or full of teasing chemistry. You look at him and say, I love when a man isn't afraid to go after what he wants. That line strikes his shadow, the part of him Jung described as the hidden self, the side he keeps locked away. It awakens the part of him that wants to win, to claim, to take action. His pride rises. His confidence expands. His energy shifts from passive to dominant, because now it's not about approval. It's about desire. Men move with passion when their desire becomes bigger than their fear, and your words are the match that lights that fire. In that moment, everything inside him rewrites itself. He stops wondering whether you like him. He stops waiting for a sign. He stops holding back to protect himself. A decision forms. A man who decides is dangerous in the most beautiful way. When he decides, he doesn't walk. He moves. He doesn't question. He acts. He doesn't hesitate. He claims. And here's what makes this magical. He believes it was his idea. That is what keeps polarity alive. That is what makes attraction electric. That is what makes him chase instead of retreat. Because deep down, men don't want a woman who does everything. They want a woman who inspires them to do everything for her. So when you speak those words, say them with calm, feminine certainty. Not nervousness, not expectation, just presence. Because confidence is felt more than it's heard. And the energy behind your voice is what makes the words unforgettable. One sentence can change everything. One opening can rewrite the entire story. One moment can turn silence into passion. When you speak into a man's inner world, his identity, his courage, his desire, he steps into the role he was always meant to play. Not because you asked him to, but because he wants to. The moment a man decides to step toward you is powerful, but what matters just as much is what happens after. Anyone can spark attraction for a moment, but sustaining pursuit, deepening it, and turning desire into commitment requires emotional intelligence, not games. A man who feels inspired will move once. A man who feels emotionally safe and psychologically challenged will pursue consistently. That's the difference between temporary chemistry and lasting attraction. And the key to creating that is understanding the emotional environment that ignites and sustains masculine pursuit. Most relationships are potential. Relationships fall apart, not because attraction disappears, but because the internal conditions that support attraction collapse. The energy turns predictable, comfortable, routine, or suppressed. Men stop pursuing when they feel taken for granted, criticized instead of appreciated, expected instead of desired, responsible for all effort, emotionally unsafe or judged, and none of these things are intentional. They happen quietly, slowly, subtly. Attraction doesn't typically die in one explosion. It dissolves in silence over time when the dynamic becomes imbalanced. So here's the psychology that brings pursuit back to life, whether he's someone you're just getting to know, someone you're dating, or someone you've been with for years. It all begins with this principle. Men give effort where they feel emotionally successful. If he feels that his actions matter, he expands. If he feels invisible or inadequate, he retreats. Masculinity grows in environments where it is recognized and appreciated. Effort comes from inspiration, not pressure. This is why admiration is so much more powerful than affection. Affection makes him feel liked. Admiration makes him feel alive. And when a man feels alive in your presence, he cannot stay still. He must move toward you. So how do you create this emotional space where he feels powerful, valued, and deeply connected? You use psychological permission. You communicate openness rather than expectation. You speak in a way that opens his chest instead of locking it up. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're talking to him about something he did, helping you with something, supporting you, showing strength, sharing vulnerability. Most women say something polite like, "Thanks, that was nice of you." But appreciation and admiration are not the same thing. Admiration hits deeper when you speak to his identity, not the act itself. Try something like, "I really admire the way you handled that. Not many men would." Or, "You have this presence that makes me feel calm and protected." Or even, "You're different, in the best way." Watch what happens. His body language changes instantly. He stands taller. His voice deepens. His eyes soften. Because admiration feeds the masculine spirit. It tells him, "Your presence matters. Your effort affects me." That's the fuel that makes him move without needing to be asked. And here's where the psychology expands. When a man feels emotionally safe and admired, another instinct switches on automatically, the instinct to lead. He wants to plan, initiate, take control in the best way. Be the pursuer rather than the passive option. You activate leadership through invitation, not instruction. For example, during a light conversation, say something like, "I love when a man takes charge. It's incredibly attractive." That sentence hits two powerful internal triggers at once. Identity, be that man. Permission, it's safe to lead with me. Men don't respond to demands. They respond to inspiration. And when you create emotional space for him to step into his masculine role, he doesn't just act once. He continues acting again and again. Now here's the deeper layer that transforms everything. When a man pursues out of desire, he feels excited. When a man pursues out of fear, he feels trapped. Fear-based pursuit never lasts. Desire-based pursuit becomes devotion. And desire is built through polarity, complementary energies between two people. Feminine softness awakens masculine strength. Masculine direction responds to feminine openness. Softness doesn't mean weakness. It means receptivity. It means allowing connection instead of controlling it. Softness is what creates emotional gravity, the pull that makes him lean in closer, without even realizing why. That's why simple, warm, and confident lines hit harder than dramatic confessions. They feel natural. They feel effortless. They feel real. For example, "I really enjoy talking to you. It's rare to feel this comfortable with someone." Or, "Being around you feels refreshing." Or, "I like the way you think. It's different." Those words are subtle. They don't confess anything explicitly. They don't give power away. They simply invite pursuit. A man will always move toward the space where he feels most alive. A man will always commit to the woman who awakens his emotional strength. A man will always chase where he feels he has something meaningful to win. And here's where the transformation becomes even deeper. When you combine admiration, openness, and invitation, he begins to see you differently, not as someone who needs him, but as someone who inspires him. And inspiration is the root of loyalty. Men stay where they feel like better men. So the question becomes, how do you build an emotional connection that makes him want to step closer again and again? How do you become unforgettable, not because of pressure, but because of impact? How do you unlock the attachment inside him that is more powerful than physical attraction? That's what we're stepping into next. because there is a psychological bonding principle that makes a man emotionally invest and initiate consistently, not just once. It's the difference between attraction that burns fast and attraction that lasts, between effort that fades and effort that grows, between a temporary spark and a lifetime flame. And it's simpler than you think. One shift changes everything. Most people respond with something surface level like, "That's cool," or "nice," or "I'm sure it will work out." But the words that change a man are far deeper and more rare. The words that touch the self, the psychological core Jung described, sound more like this: "I see how much heart you put into things. That says a lot about the kind of man you are." Or, "It takes courage to be that honest. I really respect that about you." Or even, "You don't just talk about who you are, you show it." That's powerful. Watch what happens when you say something like that. His breathing shifts, his eyes soften, then sharpen. You'll see the wall he's carried his whole life begin to melt, almost against his will. Because most men have never heard words that speak to their inner world. They're used to being valued for what they do, not who they are. When you speak to identity rather than performance, you touch him in a way that becomes unforgettable. That's when pursuit becomes natural. That's when hesitation disappears. That's when he steps forward. And here is where the psychological trigger becomes irresistible. Once a man feels seen, he feels safe enough to desire openly. Once he feels admired, he feels strong enough to lead. Once he feels emotionally trusted, he feels compelled to invest. This is the environment where he willingly makes the first move and continues making moves long after he wins you. And it's activated by one final line, the most powerful of all, because it blends admiration, safety, and challenge in a perfect balance. Say it with a slow voice, soft tone, and eyes that don't look away. "I love a man who goes after what he wants. If you felt something, I'd want you to act on it." Do you feel the charge in that sentence? That energy is deliberate. It doesn't confess feelings. It doesn't chase. It doesn't pressure. It invites. It awakens. It commands his masculine courage without ever raising your voice. And when he hears those words, something inside him decides, this is a woman worth moving for. This is a risk worth taking. This is a connection I'm not going to lose. Because now he's not afraid. He's certain. Men aren't moved by begging. Men aren't moved by manipulation. Men aren't moved by emotional demands. Men are moved by inspiration, by admiration, by emotional impact, by a woman who sees his depth, not his mask. So here's the truth that most people never learn. When a man feels emotionally safe, admired, and challenged, he doesn't need to be convinced to act. He becomes unstoppable. He texts first. He plans. He pursues. He initiates. He deepens. He chooses, not because he's afraid of losing you, but because he's excited to build something with you. Not because he needs you, but because he wants you fully. And when a man wants you with his whole chest, the world feels different. You no longer question. You no longer chase. You no longer wonder. You simply feel held, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That is real power, not in controlling him, but in awakening the part of him that already wanted to choose you. A connection like that doesn't burn out. It expands, it grows, it deepens, because attraction may spark the beginning, but emotional safety builds the forever. So say those words. Say them softly. Say them confidently. Say them like you already know he's going to respond. I love a man who goes after what he wants. If you felt something, I'd want you to act on it. And watch 99% of men make the move they were already dying to make. Not someday, not eventually, not when they find courage. Right now, because desire doesn't wait when it feels safe to rise. And the right man won't either.